Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Wednesday, July 21st, 2021, and today we're going to be talking about the Republican Party advantage in the House of Representatives elections in 2022. The upcoming midterms will be a very monumental one for both parties, a question of whether or not President Trump's presence on the GOP will prove to hinder them or help them in both the House and Senate elections. Currently speaking, the Democratic Party has a majority in the House of Representatives, which they won in the 2020 presidential election, winning 222 seats to the Republican Party's 213. This majority is the narrowest majority since 2003, which puts the Democrats in an unfortunate position ahead of a midterm election where, typically speaking, the incumbent president loses seats. Now, the last time that we saw a midterm election with the President of the United States being a Democrat was in 2014, in which the Democrats lost over 10 seats in the House of Representatives. 4 years prior to that, the Democrats lost over 60 seats in the House of Representatives, and for 2022, the GOP only needs to flip 5 seats. So it would be a very narrow increase in terms of the amount of seats that the GOP needs in order to prevent the Democrats from retaining the House majority, and it will be won at least as it stands now. We can take a look at who controls redistricting, and we'll talk about why the new generic ballot numbers really don't help the Democratic Party's case for their possibility of winning in 2022. But I've been making this point in a number of my videos talking about how the GOP already has an inherent advantage in the 2022 House elections. We can see here that in terms of redistricting control, red is Republican control, blue is Democratic control. The gray states are states with single districts, meaning they can't be gerrymandered. Yellow states are states with split or bipartisan control, and then the green states are states with independent commissions that will draw their congressional districts. However, in some of these states with independent redistricting commissions, they can be overturned by the state legislature. In many cases, there are Republican and Democratic supermajorities, so technically speaking, they can be overturned. But looking at our map here, one thing you might notice is that there is a lot more red than there is any other color, at least in terms of the amount of states that have the characterization. Democrats have control of states such as New York and Illinois, but beyond that, they really don't have control of many major states. However, on the Republican Party side, they have Texas, they have Georgia, they have Ohio, they have North Carolina, they have Florida. 5 states with a number of electoral votes where the Republican Party has a lot of control over how states' districts are drawn. In addition, Democrats gave up good opportunities in states such as California, Washington, and Michigan. And when I say good, I mean good for the sake of their party, not necessarily good for the sake of democracy, meaning that they could have had much more control over how they could have gerrymandered certain states had they put themselves in a position where they were not in an independent commission. A lot of the times, these independent commissions were put forth primarily by states with the Democratic majorities at the time or with the Democratic governor, largely to incentivize other states to follow suit in hopes of ending gerrymandering nationwide. But since Democrats did give up their power in states such as California and other states where they otherwise would be able to draw more fortunate maps for themselves, they will be more fairly drawn, which is better for the constituents there because then it more accurately represents the people in those states. But it does put the Democrats at a disadvantage because there is no independent commission in states as large as California or states even close to it, such as Florida or Texas, 2 states which are actually gaining in electoral votes, which means that Republicans have additional districts to draw in their favor. And they absolutely will do it. When you take a look at the Republican Party's history, after the 2010 census, the Republican Party was able to draw, according to this report from New York University, 16 to 17 additional seats in Congress that they otherwise would not have had if they did not do extreme partisan mapping. Essentially, redistricting alone by the Republican Party following the 2010 census accounted for 16 to 17 Republican seats in Congress. And Democrats otherwise assuming that, meaning that they would have this district either be competitive or have control of these 16 to 17 seats. It's a lot of seats. Right now, the Democrats have the majority by just 5 seats. So for the Democrats to be in a position where after 2010, 16 to 17 seats were drawn in favor of the congressional map, with Democrats actually having more control back in the past over redistricting in a number of states. Following 2020, Republicans were able to win a number of state legislature races, for example, in New Hampshire, flipped it from blue to red. In Minnesota, flipped it from blue to red. All across these states around the country, Republicans had good victories in 2018 in the governor elections and in 2020, enough that they will have control over redistricting. And sometimes in these state legislature races, you might notice there are states with Democratic governors, such as North Carolina and Kentucky, but because Republicans have supermajorities in the state legislatures, they can overturn it easily and draw their own congressional districts without the approval or the veto impacting the districts that are being drawn. And the reason why I wanted to point out today about whether or not, 2022 could be that year for the Democratic Party, and more so just highlighting why the Republican Party has such an advantage over the Democrats. And study that was released a while back that I talked about in one of my videos, I believe in early June, actually mid-June, where we talked about this new model from Emory University, from this professor who pretty much released numbers extrapolating the generic ballot throughout 2022 and putting it forth to a model that calculated the amount of House seats the Democrats would win if they were to win the generic ballot or lose the generic ballot by X, Y, and Z points. For example, it goes up to winning by 10 points and losing by just single digits. We will see the numbers actually pushed out. But one thing that really struck me as Democrats could technically retain the House majority if and only if they do this. You'll see here that it requires a 10-point lead for Democrats in the generic ballot in 2022 in order for them to gain just 2 seats in 2022. The map itself is going to be so detrimental to them, especially with Republicans redistricting a number of states. The Democrats will start out in the minority in terms of the projections as the race starts out. Currently speaking, I wholeheartedly expect the Republican Party to win back control of the House of Representatives. It seems to be a very solid portion for the GOP to be able to do this. They have a lot of control, and they would be foolish to not take advantage of it. And I can tell you now, based off of what we've seen in terms of reports from the states around the country, within their legislatures, within the Republican Party's majorities there, that they will not be letting up. They will ensure that the House map already puts the Republicans 10, 20, maybe 25 seats ahead after the 2022 elections just by redistricting alone. They will ensure that Republicans can win back the majority through simple redistricting. They could do it in states such as Texas. They could reduce 5 seats from the Democrats in a state such as Texas. There's no stopping Democrats from winning them in the future because redistricting only happens once every 10 years. But, for example, in 2010, after Republicans were able to add those additional 16, 17 seats in favor of them, it took Democrats 8 years to take back the House majority. And another point that I want to bring out from the 2018 midterm elections as to why Democrats are really at such a disadvantage ahead of 2022 goes to the popular vote results in 2018 and in 2020. The popular vote results in 2018 put the Democrats ahead by 8.4% by the time all the ballots were counted. In 2020, the Democrats won the popular vote by just 3.1%. From 8.4% to 3.1%, there was a very significant reduction. And if you remember, that article that I just showed you from CNN showed that Democrats need a 10-point lead to just gain 2 seats. In 2018, because this House map was not to say so beneficial, but because Democrats overcame a number of redistricting hurdles that they couldn't overcome for 8 years until November 2018, it's as if Democrats are starting from ground zero. And it's even more alarming knowing that after the 2008 the 2008 general election, Democrats had over 250 seats in the House of Representatives, and they even lost the majority by losing 63 seats in the 2010 midterm elections to the Republican Party. So looking at the history, the Democratic Party is in for a much bigger defeat than just 5 losses, especially looking at the House election results in 2018 and 2020, because neither of them were 10-point victories on the generic ballot. The 10-point victory required in order for Democrats to win in 2022, or at least pick up seats in the House of Representatives. Because we actually can see here, the University of Virginia Center for Politics, Sabato's crystal ball, essentially showed us the model itself and calculated it themselves, where it shows the predicted change in Democratic House seats and Senate seats. Now, if Democrats were to lose the generic ballot by 10 points, they lose 32 seats. And personally speaking, I can imagine more than 32 seats being lost. If they lose the popular vote by 5 points, they lose 24 seats. Because Democrats have that popular vote advantage, they will probably win the popular vote if they can keep the midterms within reach. But in 2010 and 2014, Republicans won the popular vote in those midterm elections. And in 2016, Republicans did as well. They came within 3 points of winning it in 2020, despite Joe Biden winning by 5 points on the presidential level. So congressional Democrats already underperformed Joe Biden in 2020. And right now, he's only approved of by around 10 points. Democrats need a 10-point advantage over the Republican Party, as this model predicts, because even if the Democratic Party outperforms their 2020 House election results, even if they outperform the popular vote, Democrats won here by 3.1. Even if they win by 5 points, they still lose 7 seats, and Republicans only need 5. So looking at this, I believe it is accounting for the advantage Republicans will likely have after redistricting. It's pretty much certain at this point, and it shows you that even if Democrats can do 2 points better than how they did in 2020, it just simply is not enough to retain control of the House of Representatives because of this inherent bias, or again, not inherent bias, but this inherent advantage that the GOP has after these redistricting and redrawn districts will be released. Because what we are seeing so far, not only are the Democrats not even reaching a 10-point advantage in the generic ballot, but it seems as if it's getting very, very close. Recent numbers show that Democrats and Republicans are even. Democrats at a high point of being up 7 percentage points, up 2 points, 3 points, 4 points, down 1 point. Yes, there is one Quinnipiac University poll that shows the Democrats ahead by 9 points. One Echelon Insights that shows the Democrats ahead by 10 points. But after these pollsters come back, for example, Ipsos, which previously had Democrats ahead by 8, they polled again, and it only shows the Democrats ahead by 7. Again, they need 10 points. They didn't even get that in 2018. And when you take a look at the generic ballot in the 2020 midterm elections, you will see, or I don't know why I called it a midterm, I apologize for that. When you look at the generic ballot for the general election, I don't know if we can go ahead and pull it up, but you'll notice that Democrats actually were expected to do better in the House elections than they actually did. They were expected to win by 7-8 points in the generic ballot, and they only ended up winning by around 3 points. So when I see these House election results and I look at 2018, I'm questioning, can Democrats even reach a point of 2018? They need a 10-point lead, but can they even reach 8 points? It seems as if, based off the numbers we are seeing so far in the recent numbers, that an average of around 3-4 points in terms of a lead is where the Democrats stand currently. And it makes sense. You know, Joe Biden at a high point of being approved of by 20 percentage points across the country. Today that stands at 9-10 points, which means that you can expect the amount of support Democrats receive to be reduced. Currently speaking, they have a trifecta, and yet the American public can't seem to name many major things that Joe Biden has passed. You have the stimulus checks, and then you have what? You have executive orders that occurred within the first week of his presidency, but then you're pretty much throttled. You can't find much to talk about in terms of Joe Biden's presidency. So when I look at these generic ballot numbers, I understand why the Democratic Party's numbers are deteriorating. While they may be able to hold on to the House majority in some type of pipe dream of them winning the popular vote by 10 percentage points, it just simply is entirely unrealistic. If Democrats couldn't even reach that in 2018 and certainly did not reach that in 2020, 2022 is not supposed to be a better year than 2018 was for Democrats, 100%. Midterm elections are almost always detrimental for the incumbent party. There are only a few exceptions. In the past, half century, actually since the end of World War II, only 2 times have midterm elections boosted the incumbent party's House results. You have 1998 and 2002. And 2002 can be largely explained due to the Democratic and Republican, coalition around President Bush following 9/11, which poured into the 2022 midterm elections. But then in 2006, the Republicans lost control of the House and control of the Senate. In 2010, Democrats lost control of the House. In 2014, they lost control of the Senate. In 2018, Republicans lost control of the House. Now it's the Democratic Party's turn. Regardless of where they stand in the generic ballot, it's going to be very difficult for the Democratic Party to retain the House majority. Democrats have that opportunity if they win by 10 points, but you have to understand exactly how unrealistic that is. The 2022 House elections have been the GOP's since November 3rd, 2020. after those results poured in, or I guess November 7th, when many of these races were decided. And after we saw a number of those state legislature races get called for Republicans, after we started to see a number of changes in support from Democrat to Republican in 2020, that's when you could have realized 2022 would not go the way the Democrats wanted it to. Yes, Democrats would do better if Trump was president right now, but redistricting would still make it difficult for them to expand their majority a lot. The Senate, however, seems to be a much better position for the Democrats. You can see here that if Democrats are even with Republicans on the generic ballot, while they may lose 15 House seats, they pick up 1 Senate seat. They win by 5 points, well, they pick up 2 Senate seats and lose 7 House seats. If they win by 10 points, they pick up 3 Senate seats and pick up 2 House seats. But again, something to point out as well that's alarming for Democrats is that they would gain more Senate seats than House seats, even if they win the generic ballot, when the House has 435 races with 50 or so competitive races, meaning they are likely lean, tilt, and toss-up, where there are probably 8 or 10 Senate seats that are in that position for 2022. The Democrats simply just don't have the ability to win the House in 2022 unless something dramatically changes from this point on. Democrats will only have this trifecta the same way Obama only had it for 2 years, again, unless something dramatically changes from this point. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.